Joan Park walked slowly down the curved hallway of Harmony Station, his hand pressed against his lower back. The pain was getting worse each week. 3 years of working in the station's biology lab had taken its toll. Earth gravity was stronger than what they had here. But his body still complained about the long hours bent over microscopes and sample containers. He checked the small map on his tablet again. The Wellness Center was in Section 7, just past the hydroponics garden. The soft blue lighting of the station corridors made his tired eyes feel a little better, but did nothing for his aching spine. "Just get through this shift," he muttered to himself. His friend Ty had recommended this place for weeks. "The alien healers will fix you right up," Ty had promised. June wasn't so sure, but he was desperate enough to try. The doors to the Wellness Center slid open with a gentle hiss. Inside, the air smelled different, something like mint and ocean breeze. The walls were a soft green, and quiet music played from hidden speakers. A human woman at the front desk smiled at him. "Mr. Park, first visit to us?" "Yes," Joan said, shifting his weight to ease the pressure on his back. "I have an appointment at 1400 hours. Perfect timing. We've assigned you to Lyra. She's new to our station, but highly rated. Room 3, just down that hall." June thanked her and headed to the room. Inside, he found a padded table, soft lighting, and several strange-looking instruments on a side table. No sign of his therapist yet. He had just settled uncomfortably on the edge of the table when the door opened. The alien who entered wasn't what he expected. June had seen Azurians before, but only from a distance in the station's public areas. Lyra stood about his height with light blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly under the lights. 4 arms extended from her slender torso, and along her temples, small ridges with iridescent markings caught the light. Her eyes were large and deep purple, with no visible whites. "Greetings, Mr. Park," she said, her voice musical and clear. "I am Lyra. This is your first treatment with an Azurian healer." June nodded, suddenly feeling nervous. "My friend Ty said you could help with my back pain. It's been getting worse for months." Lyra moved closer, all 4 of her hands working independently as she prepared her station. "Human physiology is fascinating, different from my other patients, but the principles remain similar." She gestured to the table. "Please remove your outer shirt and lie face down." June did as instructed, the movement sending another jolt of pain through his lower back. He couldn't hide his wince. "How long have you experienced this discomfort?" Lyra asked as she waited for him to position himself. "Started about a year ago. Gets worse after long shifts. The station doctor gave me medicine, but it only helps a little." Lyra made a soft humming sound. "Medicine has its place, but physical manipulation often works better for structural problems." She moved to the head of the table. "I will now check your spine alignment. My hands may feel unusual to you at first. Many humans report a tingling sensation." June tensed as the first set of hands touched his shoulders. Then he felt it. A gentle electrical current seemed to pass through his skin, warm but not uncomfortable. It reminded him of the static shock from touching metal after walking on carpet, but pleasant somehow. "Your muscles are extremely tight," Lyra observed. Her second pair of hands began working on his lower back. "Humans carry much tension here. Your species stands on 2 legs relatively recently in evolutionary terms." The strange tingling sensation increased as all 4 of her hands moved across his back in perfect coordination. Wherever her fingers pressed, the muscles seemed to release their grip on his bones. It didn't hurt, but it felt deeply strange, as if something long stuck was finally moving freely. "That's different," June managed to say. The sensation was making him slightly lightheaded. "Azurians produce natural bioelectrical fields," Lyra explained. "We can direct this energy to encourage tissue repair and relaxation. Very effective with most species, particularly humans." As she continued working, Jun found himself relaxing completely for the first time in months. The pain that had become his constant companion started to fade. He nearly fell asleep on the table as Lyra's four hands worked their magic. 40 minutes later, Lyra stepped back. "We are finished for today. Please rise slowly." Joan carefully pushed himself up, expecting the usual stab of pain. It didn't come. He twisted his torso experimentally. There was still some stiffness, but the sharp pain had disappeared. "That's amazing," he said, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. "What did you do?" Lyra's temple markings glowed slightly brighter. "I merely encouraged your body to remember its proper alignment. The bioelectric field speeds healing and reduces inflammation." She handed him a small tablet. "These exercises will help maintain today's progress." June put his shirt back on, moving more freely than he had in a long time. "Can I schedule another session?" "Of course. Most humans benefit from weekly treatments initially." Her purple eyes studied him with professional interest. "Your muscle response was excellent. Human tissue is quite receptive to our techniques." At the front desk, June booked his next appointment. As he walked back toward his quarters, he realized he was standing straighter. People in the corridor actually looked at him differently. Had he been hunching that much before? His tablet pinged with a message from Ta. How was the alien massage? Still a skeptic. June smiled as he typed his reply. "Booking again next week. You were right." That night, June slept without pain for the first time in months, dreaming of gentle blue hands and tingling electricity that flowed like water through his body. 3 weeks had passed since June's first appointment with Lyra. His back pain was almost gone. His friends noticed he stood taller now. Even his boss commented on his improved focus at work. June looked forward to his weekly sessions with the Azurian healer. But something felt different when he arrived for his fourth appointment. Lyra seemed distracted. Her movements, usually smooth and precise, appeared slightly jerky. The soft blue color of her skin had darkened, especially around her temple markings. "Are you feeling well today?" June asked as he lay on the treatment table. Lyra blinked her large purple eyes rapidly. "Yes, I am. Functional." One of her four hands dropped a small bottle of oil, which shattered on the floor. "My apologies. Please remain still while I clean this." As she worked on his back, June noticed her hands felt unusually warm. The tingling sensation that usually felt pleasant now pulsed with an irregular rhythm. Twice during the session, Lyra stepped away suddenly, her breathing fast and shallow. "Did I do something wrong?" June asked when she paused for the third time. "No," Lyra said quickly. "It is not you. It is a personal matter." When the session ended, June felt only partially relieved of his tension. As he was leaving, he noticed Lyra's hands were trembling. The next day in the station cafeteria, June sat with his roommate Tai and their friend Min, who worked in medical services. "You still seeing that Azurian healer?" Min asked between bites of his lunch. June nodded, but she seemed strange yesterday, almost sick. Min and Tai exchanged looks. "You don't know about the warming, do you?" Min asked. "The what?" Min lowered his voice. "It's this biological cycle Azurians go through. Happens once every 2 station years. Their empathic abilities go into overdrive. They get super sensitive to emotions and physical contact." Ta nodded. "I heard they usually stop working with non-Azurians during this time. Too much emotional feedback or something." "Most of the Azurian staff have canceled all appointments for the next 3 weeks, Min added. "There was a notice in medical this morning." June frowned. "Lyra didn't cancel mine." "That's weird," Min said. "From what I understand, it can be overwhelming for them to work with other species during this time, especially humans. We apparently have very loud emotions compared to other species." June thought about Lyra's trembling hands and distracted manner. "Should I cancel my next appointment?" Ta shrugged. "Maybe she needs the work credits, or maybe she's not affected as strongly." The next week, June arrived at his appointment unsure what to expect. The receptionist looked surprised to see him. "Oh, Mr. Park, we thought you might have canceled." Lyra is your therapist, correct? Yes. Is there a problem? The receptionist hesitated. Well, most of our Azurian staff are taking personal leave during their seasonal cycle. Lyra is the only one still accepting appointments. I should warn you that some patients have reported unusual experiences. June considered canceling but decided against it. His back had started aching again, and no human therapist had been able to help before Lyra. When he entered the treatment room, the temperature felt noticeably higher. Lyra stood by the window, staring out at the stars. When she turned, June gasped softly. Her temple markings were glowing bright blue, pulsing like heartbeats. Her skin had darkened to a deep indigo color. "You came," she said, her voice huskier than usual. "I was not certain you would." "I heard about the warming," June said carefully. "If you need to cancel, I understand." Lyra's four hands made a complex gesture. "It would be easier. But I do not wish to disappoint my patients." She moved closer. "You should know that during this time, my abilities are less controlled. I may sense more than physical pain." June didn't fully understand what she meant, but he nodded anyway. "I trust you." The session began normally, but as soon as Lyra's hands touched his skin, June felt something different. The usual tingling was stronger, almost like small lightning bolts dancing across his back. He could swear he heard a humming sound that seemed to match his heartbeat. Halfway through the treatment, Lyra suddenly stepped back with a small cry. "What's wrong?" June asked, raising his head. "You are thinking of someone. A woman. There is sadness and longing." Lyra's markings flashed rapidly. "I should not know this. It is private." June felt his face grow hot. He had been thinking about his ex-girlfriend back on Earth. "How did you?" "The warming enhances our empathic abilities," Lyra explained, her voice strained. "Normally I sense only physical sensations, but now, emotions transfer too easily." She looked embarrassed. "This is why we usually avoid non-Azurian contact during this time. Your feelings are very strong." June sat up slowly. "Should we stop?" Lyra's four hands twisted together nervously. "Perhaps that would be wise. I apologize for the intrusion." As June prepared to leave, he noticed Lyra keeping her distance. "Will you be okay?" he asked. "Yes. The cycle lasts 3 more weeks. Then things return to normal." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "Most Azurians isolate with others of our kind during this time. The emotional resonance is less intense with our own species." "Then why didn't you cancel your human appointments?" June asked. Lyra's markings pulsed once, brightly. "I find human emotions fascinating. Different from ours. More vibrant." She looked away quickly. "That was inappropriate to share. The warming affects our social filters as well." As June left the wellness center, he overheard 2 staff members talking worriedly. "She's the only Azurian still treating humans during the warming. The supervisor is concerned. If there's an incident." June walked away wondering what kind of incident they feared. Despite the strangeness, he decided he would keep his next appointment. Something about Lyra's struggle touched him, though he couldn't explain why. June stood outside the wellness center, hesitating. A week had passed since the strange session with Lyra. He had received 3 messages from the center suggesting he reschedule with a human therapist, but he had ignored them. His back pain was returning, and only Lyra's treatments had truly helped. Inside, the center seemed unusually quiet. The human receptionist looked up with surprise when June entered. "Mr. Park, I didn't expect to see you. Didn't you get our messages?" "I did," June said. "Is Lyra here today?" The receptionist frowned. "She is, but we're strongly advising patients to reschedule. The Azurian warming cycle has reached its peak. Lyra is the only Azurian still working, and even she's been unpredictable." "I'll take my chances," June said. "My back is getting bad again." The receptionist sighed. "Room 5 today. But I need you to sign this waiver first." June raised his eyebrows at the legal document but signed it anyway. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed the lights dimming and brightening in an odd pattern. When he reached room 5, he found the door slightly ajar. Inside, Lyra was sitting in a corner, her 4 arms wrapped around herself. Her skin had turned a deep midnight blue, and her temple markings were flashing rapidly like emergency beacons. She looked up when June entered, her purple eyes wide. "You should not be here," she said, her voice shaking. "Not safe today." June closed the door behind him. "Are you sick? Can I help?" Lyra stood up slowly. "The warming is at its peak. All other Azurians have stopped working." She took a deep breath. "But I wanted to prove I could maintain control." As she moved toward him, June noticed small arcs of blue electricity dancing between her fingers. The air in the room felt charged, like before a thunderstorm. "Maybe we should skip today," June suggested, suddenly nervous. "No," Lyra said firmly. "I can help you. I must prove I can function during the warming." She gestured to the table. "Please, I will be careful." Against his better judgment, June removed his shirt and lay down on the table. The moment Lyra's hands touched his back, he knew something was different. The usual pleasant tingling was now an intense current that made his muscles jump. He could hear Lyra's breathing becoming faster. "Your emotions," she whispered. "So strong today. You are worried." "About me?" June tried to relax. "Yes. You don't seem well." Lyra's hands pressed harder. "Humans feel so deeply. It's overwhelming but beautiful." Her voice changed, becoming dreamy. "I can see your memories, your home on Earth, the mountains you miss, the woman who broke your heart." June tensed. "Lyra, you shouldn't be able to." "I know," she interrupted. "The connection is too deep. I cannot stop it." Suddenly, Lyra cried out. Her temple markings flared blindingly bright, and June felt a shock like static electricity across his entire body. He rolled off the table as the lights in the room surged, and then went completely dark. Emergency lighting kicked on, bathing everything in red. An alarm began blaring throughout the station. "What happened?" June asked, finding Lyra collapsed on the floor. "I lost control," she whispered. "The energy discharged into the station systems." The door burst open. 2 security officers in uniform rushed in, followed by the center supervisor. "That's her," the supervisor said, pointing at Lyra. "She's causing the power fluctuations." One officer checked his tablet. 3 sections of the station are down. Life support is on backups. The second officer approached Lyra cautiously. "Ma'am, you need to come with us. All Azurians are being temporarily contained until this situation is resolved." "Contained?" June asked. "She's not dangerous. She's sick." "She just knocked out power to 1/3 of the station," the first officer said firmly. "Director's orders. All Azurians are to be quarantined in Section 12 until their biological cycle ends." Lyra tried to stand but stumbled. June moved to help her, but the officer stepped between them. "Sir, please step back. Azurian bioelectric fields are unstable right now. For your safety, no physical contact." June watched helplessly as they helped Lyra to her feet. Her temple markings were still flashing, but more weakly now. "This is my fault," she said, looking at June with sad eyes. "I should have canceled your appointments. I thought I was strong enough." "It's not your fault," June insisted. No one explained how serious this could be. The officers led Lyra toward the door. She looked back at June one last time. "Your emotions, they were so beautiful, like colors we don't have in our spectrum." After Lyra was taken away, June was questioned by station security for nearly 2 hours. They'd wanted to know every detail of his sessions with Lyra, especially the last one. "Has she ever accessed your thoughts before?" a severe-looking officer asked. "Not like today," June answered truthfully. "She said the warming enhances their abilities." "That's putting it mildly," another officer muttered. The whole Azurian population is affecting station systems. We've had to shut down their quarters power grid and isolate it." Later that evening, Jun sat in his room, watching the news on his tablet. The station director had issued a statement. Due to unforeseen biological complications, all Azurian residents have been temporarily relocated to Section 12, where specialized containment fields have been installed. This is for the safety of all station residents. Normal operations will resume when their biological cycle ends in approximately 2 weeks. June couldn't stop thinking about Lyra's face as they took her away. She had looked ashamed, but also in pain. He remembered her words. "Your emotions, they were so beautiful." He made a decision then. Somehow he would find a way to help her. There had to be a solution better than locking away an entire species for something they couldn't control. Tai entered their shared quarters, interrupting Jun's thoughts. "Did you hear? They're saying an Azurian Masseuse caused the power outage." He stopped when he saw Jun's face. "Wait, wasn't that your healer?" Jun nodded slowly. "And we're going to help her?" Tai looked at his roommate like he had gone crazy. "Help her? The entire station is on emergency power because of what happened." Jun paced their small living quarters. "It's not her fault. It's a biological process they can't control." "So what exactly do you plan to do?" Tai asked, dropping his bag on the couch. "I don't know yet, but locking them all away isn't right." Jun stopped pacing and turned to Ta. "You're a neurologist. You must know something about how their empathic abilities work." Ta shrugged. "Not much. Azurian physiology isn't my specialty." But Jun's determined expression made him sigh. "Fine. I can access some research papers from the medical database." For the next 3 days, Jun and Ta spent every free moment studying Azurian biology. They learned that Azurians had specialized neural cells that could detect and respond to the electrical patterns of other beings. During the warming, these cells became hypersensitive. "Look at this," Ta said on the 3rd night, pointing to his screen. "Azurians naturally synchronize with each other's bioelectric fields. It's how they maintain balance during the warming." But why would Lyra risk working with humans during this time? Jun wondered. Ta scrolled through more data. "Wait, this is interesting. Human neural patterns are actually more stable than most species during emotional states." He looked up at Jun. "Maybe she sensed that in you." "What do you mean?" "Human brains process emotions differently. We compartmentalize better than most species. Even when we feel strong emotions, parts of our brain remain logical and controlled." Ta's eyes widened. What if humans could actually help Azurians during the warming? The next morning, they requested a meeting with Dr. Han, the station's chief medical officer. After hearing their theory, she looked skeptical. "You're suggesting that human neural patterns could stabilize Azurian bioelectric fields. Based on what evidence?" "The fact that Lyra chose to keep working with human patients when all other Azurians isolated themselves," Jun said. "She told me human emotions were different, more vibrant, but somehow fascinating to her." "And this research," Tai added, showing Dr. Han his findings. "Human brains maintain more separation between emotional and logical functions. We might act as natural dampeners for their overactive empathic abilities." Dr. Han frowned. "Even if you're right, it's too dangerous. The last incident affected critical station systems. What if we created a controlled environment?" Jun suggested. "A shielded room where we could test our theory without risk to the station." After much debate, Dr. Han reluctantly agreed to present their idea to the station director. To everyone's surprise, the director approved a limited test. With power still unstable and 3 sections of the station running on backup systems, he was willing to try anything. 2 days later, Jun stood outside a specially prepared room in the medical section. The walls had been lined with electromagnetic shielding, and monitoring equipment filled one corner. Dr. Han gave him final instructions. "Remember, if anything feels wrong, you say the word disengage, and we pull you out immediately. The Azurian's bioelectric field is extremely powerful right now." June nodded, trying to hide his nervousness. When the door opened, he saw Lyra sitting cross-legged on the floor. Her skin was the darkest blue he had seen yet, and her temple markings pulsed rapidly. She looked up, her purple eyes widening. "June, why are you here? It is not safe." He sat down across from her, keeping the recommended distance. "We have an idea that might help you. All of you." Lyra looked confused. "Help how?" "Your people synchronize with each other during the warming to maintain balance, right? We think humans might be able to do something similar for you." He explained their theory as simply as he could. Lyra's markings flashed with interest. "This is why I preferred human patients. Your emotional patterns are both strong and contained. Like water behind a dam." "Exactly. So I'm going to try something. A human meditation technique." June showed her how to position her forehands. "Mirror my breathing. Focus on the rhythm." At first, nothing seemed to happen. June breathed slowly and deeply, the way Ta had taught him. Lyra matched his pattern. 5 minutes passed. 10. June began to wonder if their theory was wrong. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, Lyra's temple markings began to pulse in time with his breathing. The rapid, erratic flashing steadied. The deep midnight blue of her skin lightened slightly. "Something is happening," Lyra whispered. "The chaos in my mind. It's quieting." Through the glass wall, June could see Tai and Dr. Han watching intently, checking readings on their monitors. After 30 minutes, Dr. Han entered the room. "The fluctuations in her bioelectric field have decreased by 60%, she said, looking amazed. "How do you feel?" she asked Lyra. "More controlled. His pattern is like a strong current I can follow." Lyra looked at June with new understanding. "You are anchoring me." Within hours, word of the successful test spread through the station. Other Azurians requested the same treatment. Volunteers from the human population stepped forward, especially those with meditation experience. 5 days later, all Azurians had been paired with human partners. The power systems stabilized completely. The quarantine was lifted, though Azurians and their human partners still met daily for synchronization sessions. In the station cafeteria, Jun sat with Tai and Dr. Han, watching humans and Azurians interacting more freely than ever before. "The station director wants to make this an official program," Dr. Han said. "We're calling it Bioelectric Synchronization Therapy. BST for short," Tai added with a smile. "Catchy, right?" June spotted Lyra entering the cafeteria. Her skin had returned to its normal light blue, though her temple markings still pulsed a bit faster than before the warming. She smiled when she saw him and walked over. "I have been approved to resume my healing practice tomorrow," she said, "with some new safety protocols." "That's great news," Jun said. Lyra's forehands made a gesture of respect. "What you discovered may change relations between our species forever. Humans have always been seen as emotionally unpredictable, but now we understand. Your chaos contains its own kind of harmony." 6 months had passed since the warming crisis on Harmony Station. June stood nervously in the corridor outside the newly constructed Human Azurian Wellness Institute, straightening his formal jacket. Today was the grand opening, and the hallway was filled with officials from a dozen different species. "Stop fidgeting," Todd whispered beside him. "You look fine." "Easy for you to say," Jun replied. "You're not making this speech in front of the Federation ambassador." The last half-year had transformed Jun's life in ways he never imagined. After their breakthrough with bioelectric synchronization therapy, he and Lyra had become minor celebrities on the station. Their discovery had spread to other space stations and even to the Azurian homeworld. What began as a desperate attempt to help one friend had become a revolution in interspecies medicine. The large doors at the end of the hall opened, and Lyra emerged. She wore formal Azurian robes in deep purple that complemented her blue skin. Her temple markings glowed softly with excitement. "It is time," she said, approaching Jun. "Everyone is seated." Together, They entered the main treatment hall of the institute. The room was circular with 20 private treatment areas around the edges and a central gathering space. Nearly 200 people filled the chairs, humans, Azurians, and representatives from the station's other species. Station Director Quan rose to speak first. Today marks a historic moment for Harmony Station and for interspecies relations throughout the Federation. 6 months ago, a crisis threatened to divide us. Instead, it brought us closer together. June listened as the director described the events during the warming and the discovery that followed. He still found it hard to believe that something so simple, human emotional processing, could be so valuable to another species. When it was June's turn to speak, he walked to the center of the room with Lyra at his side. "I was just a lab technician with a bad back," he began, earning gentle laughter from the crowd. "I came to Lyra for treatment, not knowing anything about Azurian biology. But what seemed like a problem turned out to be an opportunity." He explained in simple terms how human brain patterns created a stable reference point for Azurians during their biological cycle. "We discovered that what makes humans different, our ability to feel deeply while maintaining mental structure, is exactly what Azurians needed." Lyra stepped forward. "For generations, my people have viewed the warming as a time of isolation and difficulty. We never imagined that another species could help us navigate it." Her 4 hands made elegant gestures as she spoke. "This institute will not only provide physical healing, but will serve as a center for cultural exchange and understanding." After the speeches, June and Lyra demonstrated their synchronized therapy technique for the audience. June sat cross-legged on a mat, while Lyra mirrored his position opposite him. As they began the breathing pattern they had perfected, her temple markings gradually synchronized with his heartbeat. The audience watched in fascinated silence. "The human provides the rhythm, the steady pattern," explained Dr. Han, who had helped develop the protocols. "The Azurian's natural empathic abilities then have a stable reference point." Later, as guests toured the facility, the Azurian ambassador approached June. "This discovery changes everything for my people," she said. Her skin was a deeper blue than Lyra's, with more complex markings that indicated her senior status. "Do you understand what you have done? For thousands of years, the warming has limited our ability to work, travel, and interact with other species. You have freed us from that constraint." June felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. It was mostly an accident. Lyra did the hard part. "No," the ambassador said firmly. "It required both of you. Neither species would have discovered this alone." Across the room, June watched as Lyra demonstrated equipment to a group of human medical students. Since the warming, the number of humans studying Azurian healing techniques had tripled. Equally, Azurian interest in human meditation and emotional processing had created new classes throughout the station. That evening, after the guests had left, June and Lyra sat alone in the quiet institute. The events of the day had left them both tired but happy. "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" June asked, looking around at the facility that now employed 30 people. Lyra's markings pulsed gently. "Never. On my world, we are taught that the warming is our burden to bear alone. The idea of sharing it with another species would have seemed impossible. And now 200 Azurians on this station alone have human synchronization partners. The practice is spread to 4 other stations. Next month, the first human therapists will travel to my homeworld." She looked at him directly. "You will join us, yes?" June nodded. 6 months ago, he would have been terrified at the idea of visiting an alien planet. Now he looked forward to it. The next morning, June arrived early at the institute to find a line of patients already waiting. Not just Azurians seeking treatment, but members of 3 other empathic species who wondered if the human synchronization technique might help them too. As he unlocked the doors, his tablet pinged with a message. The Federation Science Council had approved funding for a 5-year research program into human Azurian bioelectric interactions, with June and Lyra named as lead researchers. Lyra arrived moments later, her forearms carrying equipment for the day. "Ready for our first official day?" she asked. June smiled. "Ready. Though I still find it strange that my most valuable skill turned out to be simply being human." Lyra's markings flashed with amusement. "Perhaps that is the lesson in all this. What seems ordinary to you may be extraordinary to someone else." As the first patients entered, Jun reflected on how a simple back problem had led to all this. Sometimes, he thought, the universe had strange ways of bringing people together.